What happens when Hollywood's most respected legend meets late-night television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Clint Eastwood sits down with Jimmy Kimmel, expecting a respectful conversation about his legendary career, only to find himself ambushed with loaded political questions and cheap shots that would push even the most composed movie icon to his breaking point. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two titans clash in what became the most explosive late-night confrontation we've ever witnessed. Last night's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live started like any other celebrity appearance. The 94-year-old Eastwood, promoting his latest directorial project, walked onto the stage to thunderous applause from the studio audience. His weathered face carried that familiar stoic expression that made him a screen legend, but there was something different in his eyes, a wariness that suggested he knew this wouldn't be the respectful tribute to his six-decade career that his publicist had promised. Kimmel, wearing his trademark smirk, began with what seemed like standard pleasantries about Eastwood's new film. "So, Clint, at 94, you're still directing movies. Most people your age are watching Wheel of Fortune," Kimmel quipped, drawing nervous laughter from the audience. Eastwood's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Well, Jimmy, some of us believe in staying productive instead of making jokes for a living." The first crack in the facade appeared when Kimmel shifted gears abruptly. "You know, Clint, you've been pretty vocal about politics over the years. Remember when you talked to that empty chair at the Republican National Convention?" The audience fell silent. Eastwood's eyes narrowed. "That was 12 years ago, Jimmy. I thought we were here to talk about my film." But Kimmel wasn't backing down. "Oh, come on, it was hilarious. Although I have to ask, do you still talk to furniture, or have you moved on to appliances?" The condescending tone was unmistakable now. Eastwood leaned forward in his chair, his famous steely gaze fixed directly on his host. "You know what's hilarious, Jimmy? Watching someone hide behind a desk, making cheap shots instead of having a real conversation." The tension in the studio was palpable. Kimmel's smile faltered for just a moment before he doubled down. "Hey, I'm just asking the questions America wants answered. Speaking of which, how do you feel about your party's current direction? Still supporting the whole Make America Great Again thing?" Eastwood's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "My party? Son, I've been an independent longer than you've been alive. Maybe do your homework before you invite someone on your show." The audience began shifting uncomfortably as Kimmel pressed further, his voice taking on a mocking tone. "Independent? Sure. But let's be honest. You've got some pretty outdated views for someone in Hollywood, don't you think?" That's when something shifted in Eastwood's demeanor entirely. The legendary cool was giving way to something much more dangerous. "Outdated? Boy, I was making films that mattered when you were still wetting your pants." What happened next would transform this celebrity appearance into the most explosive confrontation late-night television has ever seen. Kimmel, perhaps sensing he had struck a nerve, decided to twist the knife deeper. "Oh, touched a nerve there, did I? Look, Clint, I get it. You're from a different generation. Back when men were men and movies had actual plots, right? But this is 2025. Maybe it's time to accept that your brand of tough guy masculinity is a little problematic." The word hung in the air like a loaded gun. Eastwood's voice dropped to that familiar whisper that had intimidated countless movie villains. "Problematic? Son, you wouldn't know real masculinity if it slapped you across that smug face of yours." The audience gasped audibly. This was no longer entertainment. This was personal warfare being broadcast live to millions. But Kimmel wasn't finished. With cameras rolling and sensing viral content, he leaned back in his chair with theatrical confidence. "Wow. Aggressive much? This is exactly what I'm talking about. The whole angry old man routine. Tell me, does that actually work on anyone anymore? Or do people just pretend to be intimidated out of politeness?" The legendary director slowly stood up from his chair, his full imposing frame casting a shadow across Kimmel's desk. At 94, Eastwood still commanded respect through sheer presence, and every person in that studio felt it. You want to see aggressive Jimmy? Keep pushing. His voice carried the weight of decades spent commanding film sets and facing down real danger. Kimmel, either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, pressed on. Sit down, Clint. You're making the audience uncomfortable. This isn't one of your westerns where you can just intimidate people into submission. This is my show, and frankly, your whole tough guy act is getting a little embarrassing to watch. That's when Eastwood did something nobody expected. He smiled. Not the warm smile of a beloved movie star, but the cold, calculating grin of a man who had just decided he was done playing games. Your show? Let me tell you something about your show, Jimmy. You hide behind writers, producers, and a carefully controlled environment because you're too much of a coward to have a real conversation with anyone. The color drained from Kimmel's face as Eastwood continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. You think ambushing a 94-year-old man with gotcha questions makes you some kind of journalist? You're nothing but a playground bully with a television show, and deep down, you know it. Security guards began moving closer to the stage as the confrontation reached a boiling point. Kimmel, clearly rattled but trying to maintain control, made what would prove to be his biggest mistake of the night.